Hello, coming to you from the predictive city of board gaming, Omaha, Nebraska. Welcome to the Out of the Dust podcast. I'm your host, Psychic Bryce. Tied in with the popular recurring Out of the Dust Geek list on Board Game Geek, the Out of the Dust podcast is a bi-weekly podcast that is focused on re-exploring games we play that we hadn't previously played in a year or more. Why did the game get dusty? Why did you decide to dust it off? How does the game compare to how you remembered it? Are you likely to play it more often in the future? These are the questions that we're interested in examining on Out of the Dust. This week on the podcast, episode 60. On the Out of the Dust segment, I'll bring San Marco out of the dust, and a contributor will dust off Merkator. On the reaction segment, I make my 2020 predictions. On the What I've Been Playing segment, I review For Glory. On the Obscure Bryce game segment, I review Inhabit the Earth. And we wrap up the episode by counting down my top 10 most disappointing games of 2019. I had a chance to bring San Marco out of the dust recently. San Marco is a 2001 Ravensburger title from Ticket to Ride designer Alan R. Mood. I last played it 1 year, 7 months, and 15 days ago, and I taught my friends Emily and Rob how to play. This is such a good game, and as much as I like Ticket to Ride, I think San Marco might be Alan R. Moon's best game. The combination of I-split, you-choose, and area control mechanics remains innovative and engaging to this day. It's one of those games that I play, and I think, wow, this does not feel like a 20-year-old game. But the 3 to 4 player count requirement does make it tough to get to the table. I've really been itching for it recently, though, and after a few weeks of packing in my game bag, was able to get it to the table with my main group. Some of them had played before, but didn't remember it too well. One remarked how similar it was in appearance, including components to Rialto. The presence of the Doge in both games does make it easy to think of one when I think of the other. And in fact, I think my recent plays of Rialto are what brought San Marco to the forefront of my mind this time. Let's see what a contributor brought out of the dust. Doug Mann, username Doug1020, brought Merkator out of the dust. Merkator is a 2010 economic game from Uwe Rosenberg and publisher Lookout Games. Doug last played it 1 year, 5 months, and 27 days ago, and currently rates it a 6.9 out of 10. He writes, I really wanted Merkator to work for me, but it really didn't. Although Tom Vassell may have had enough Renaissance merchants for a lifetime, I haven't found one key to history the way Uwe Rosenberg's Merkator is tied to the 30 Years' War. Rado's video bragged about the synergies, and when they come out, it's great. They just don't always do so, though. Depending on the turn of the decks, you may get lots of following, playing off your opponent's moves, or you may get multiplayer solitaire. Our one game group play turned out that way. Nobody demanded it back to the table. Of the 2 solo plays, one was pretty decent with bonus cards and a few contracts that encouraged following. The second play was pretty boring, with few synergies. And since I played the long version in that one, it kind of overstayed its welcome. Since Cheryl found it too dry, I might trade this one if the opportunity came along. Thanks for the contribution, Doug. I found Merkator an interesting game because it feels so unlike Uwe's other games, but it's not one that hits the table very often for me. My next play would certainly be a dusty one. I love those trade good trays, though. Reaction segment time. This episode, I'll be going over my board game predictions for 2020. The first prediction I'd like to make concerns the current state of the BGG Top 10. I see 3 games in the Top 10 that look vulnerable to falling out: Twilight Struggle, Gaia Project, and Scythe. But what games could replace them? I think Spirit Island, Wingspan, and Nemesis have a chance of breaking into the Top 10. I could see Wingspan replacing Scythe in the Top 10, especially since we have a second Wingspan expansion on the way by the end of the year. So let's make that prediction just for fun, one Stonemaier game replacing another. I think Spirit Island could get close, but Nemesis has a lot of momentum right now. So I'm going to say that the only other top 10 shakeup this year is going to be Nemesis replacing Gaia Project. What 2020 game will wind up the highest ranked? On Mars has a huge advantage, having been fulfilled already and already being in the top 400. But I'm not sure if it has top 100 potential ultimately. So I'm looking at the other games slated for release in the first half of the year that could make a big and rapid splash in the rankings. The timing is iffy, but the theme and mechanics are poised for the game to garner a lot of initial attention. So I'm going to make an outside-the-box prediction of Calico, the cat-themed abstract tile-laying game, to be the highest-ranked 2020 game by the end of the year. What game currently in the top 50 will fall out of the top 50 and fall the furthest? I think I'll take Robinson Crusoe for this one, which is currently sitting at number 46. This used to be a top 10 game, people, but it's really slipped in recent years. I think it continues its slide in 2020 and will capture this particularly unfortunate distinction. Finally, let's see if I can predict some 2020 industry trends. A couple of things really stood out to me about 2019. the impressive slate of Grail game reprints that came out, and the number of mega epic games along the scale of Gloomhaven, games that require dozens or even hundreds of hours to complete. I can't believe we'll see anything close to the number of Grail game reprints again, but I think we'll see the trend of mega epics continue for another year. But I think the thing that will emerge in 2020 and characterize 2020 will be a renaissance and revolution in solo designs. I feel like solo gaming has slowly been building in intensity, and I feel like it's ready to really explode on the scene. I think we're going to see more solo-capable games in 2020 than ever before, and I think there's going to be at least one solo-only game that comes out that truly revolutionizes the genre, and gets a lot of people who have never soloed before soloing themselves. And that will conclude my predictions for 2020. I'll check in with these predictions early in 2021 and see how I did. This week on the What I've Been Playing segment, I'm going to tell you about For Glory, a two-player-only gladiator-themed deck-building game designed by my friend Alex Wolf, and launching on Kickstarter today. I'm the chairman of the Spiel Masons, an Omaha-area game design organization that promotes local game designs through playtesting and feedback. I remember well several years ago when Alex first brought For Glory to one of our weekly playtest sessions. His original prototype consisted of nothing more than text pasted on the backs of Magic the Gathering cards. But even in that very early stage of development, it was clear that he had a distinctive and innovative game design on his hands. And it's been a fascinating experience to watch his development and evolution over the years. There have been a lot of adjustments, tweaks, and fine-tuning during the process, and now it's done. Here's how it works. Each player plays as the owner of a gladiator school, using income cards to acquire gladiator, patron, scheme, and tactic cards for their deck. Each of these main types of cards are interconnected. Patron cards determine how many gladiators can be in play. The gladiators come into play at one of three different arenas, represented by different arena cards. Scheme cards introduce short-term and immediate effects that affect the other cards or the player area. All these cards come into play during a series of alternating machination turns. One of the stats on the gladiator cards is the bloodlust value. When the total bloodlust sum of all the gladiators in play equals an incremental trigger, an arena phase happens and the gladiators at the arenas engage in combat. An initiative value determines in which order gladiators activate. Their attack value is directed towards an opposing gladiator and deals wounds. When a gladiator gains wounds equal to their defense value, they are defeated. The player with a gladiator standing last wins a glory point. Two of the three arenas grant temporary glory points that alternate between the player who wins a battle at that arena. The final arena grants permanent glory points to the winner. The arenas that grant temporary glory points also grant temporary special abilities to the player who last won a battle at that arena, while the permanent arena grants winning players at that arena a permanent special ability for the remainder of the game. The player who first accumulates 5 glory points wins. I'm very impressed with how this game turned out. Calling games a labor of love is often an overused phrase, but it really is the case in For Glory. Literally hundreds of playtests and thousands of hours went into developing this game, and it shows in a finely tuned package of mechanics and theme. There are some familiar deck-building mechanics in the game, but the entire experience feels fresh and novel. I can't think of any other deck builder that has the player interaction of For Glory. And the tactical back-and-forth tug-of-war for glory points and arena abilities creates a mounting pool of tension from beginning to end. It's not often that a Kickstarter comes out that I've actually played ahead of time and have complete confidence in backing, but For Glory checks all of those boxes. I've played it a bunch, and I'm very excited to finally have a chance to acquire my own copy. I'm a day one backer, and if anything about the theme or mechanics sounds intriguing to you, I highly encourage you to check the project out for yourself. Obscure Bryce Game segment time. This week on the segment, I'm going to tell you about Inhabit the Earth, a 2015 animal-themed tableau-building race game from designer Richard Bryce of Key Game fame and publisher R&D Games. As a Richard Bryce fan, this was an easy decision to back the game on Kickstarter when it launched several years ago. But as a non-key Richard Bryce game, and despite initial positive critical reception, the game has faded into obscurity since until fewer than 20 people are logging plays of it a month now. I can't help but wonder if part of the reason for this decline in plays is due to the infamous cover of the game, which frequently appears on worst board game art of all time lists. And not without cause, the animals on the cover look a little off, and many of them look legitimately stoned to boot. The cover was supposed to be an homage of an older Ravensburger game called wildlife adventure, and I can see what they were going for, but it didn't quite work out. As a result, the cover comes across as cartoony and suggests a light, casual game. But that's not the case. Inhabit the Earth is a fairly complex game with lots of intertwined mechanisms. Here's how it works. Each of the 6 game boards depicts a different continent, through which a track composed of various terrain spots winds. Players attempt to advance their various species counters along the track, passing through various levels and collecting terrain and point tokens along the way. On a player's turn, they choose one action to take from a menu of 3. A menagerie action enables players to play animal cards from their hand into their tableau by bringing a new species into play on a continent track, increasing a species' herd size, adapting a species with additional terrain icons, and or evolving a species into another species with new special abilities. A breed action enables a player to draw new animal cards into hand from one of 3 decks depending on which levels on the continent tracks their species are currently in. The move action enables species to advance from one terrain spot to the next using their matching terrain icons, migrate to new continents, and hopefully eventually reach the end of a path. After a certain number of species have reached the end of a path, the game ends and players earn points for all the point tokens they've collected, which continent level their species wound up in, and end-of-game species special ability scoring bonuses. Inhabit the Earth was one of my top games of the year when it was released, and I remember I played it 20 times that first year. I've played it only sporadically since, but I've been thinking about it a lot lately and had gone out of my way to dust it off and show it to some friends who hadn't heard of it before. This has resulted in several plays in the last few months, much to my delight, because this game holds up. I'm still comfortable calling it Richard Breeze's best design. The theme is fun, the tableau building is engaging and satisfying because of its depth of possibilities, and the multi-use cards that trigger all the actions create a never-ending sequence of thoughtful and impactful decisions. It's a game I'm going to try to keep within reach for a variety of gaming situations, and it's one I highly suggest people make the effort of tracking down. This episode of the podcast, I'm going to continue my review of 2019 with a countdown of my top 10 disappointing games I learned this year. Most of these were published in 2019, but there were a few older titles on the list that I just never played before. Interestingly, while I thought 2019 was a little better for board games than 2018 or 2017, for the first time in several years I was able to come up with a full 10 games for the disappointing list. The last several disappointing lists have only had 5 or 6 titles on them, but I found 10 no problem this year for some reason. Number 10. Robin Hood and the Merry Men. I regretted not backing the Kickstarter and went out of my way to acquire a retail copy later. Much to my regret. The use of dice for critically important gameplay elements with little control over mitigation killed this game for me. Add this to the ever-growing list of games that prove semi-co-op is a failed genre. Number 9. Walk the Plank. I like Get Bit, but this is a less fun game in the same realm. And it doesn't have the fun bits that Get Bit does either. I'm not impressed, and the weird grotesque art of the deluxe edition I played with is a big turnoff too. Number 8. Sorcerer. If you're going to use Smash Up as your game design inspiration, don't make your game a longer, more tedious, and more convoluted iteration of it. I like Smash Up from time to time, and part of that game's charm is the theme, the fun deck combination possibilities, and discovering fun card combinations to unleash. But Sorcerer has none of that charm. Its generic fantasy theme is bland, and the deck combinations are uninteresting. Number 7. Black Angel. My friends over at the Punchboard Paradise podcast unanimously picked this one as their most disappointing game of the year, and they make a great argument for why, if you want to give them a listen. Suffice it for me to say, the intended perfection of Twa mechanics didn't happen here. Number 6. Obscurio. I'm not a fan of Hidden Trader mechanics anyway, but to add it to a Mysterium type of visual association game? Just why? Like many other Hidden Trader games, the mechanic feels tacked on and needless with everything else going on. Number 5. 5211. Not only does it make my top 5 most disappointing games of the year list, but it also wins outright the award for stupidest game title of the year. I thought this game had a lot of potential actually when I first heard a description of it, but there's too little information to go on in planning which cards to play when, which leads to completely random and arbitrary scoring. A frustrating game devoid of any fun. Number 4. Curious.